Hello and welcome to What's in It for Africa, the Inside the Issue show with me, Ugeux. On this month's show, we're going to be looking at the remittances market between Europe and Africa. These are payments made by the African diaspora based in Europe to families and communities back home. We're going to look at the discussions between the European and African leaders back in November on the issue. We're also looking at why the African continent is the most expensive for remittance fees and the technology and policy solutions to lower those fees and improve competition. Over 27 billion euros is sent back in remittances every year to sub-Saharan Africa, and this year alone it's going to go up to 33 billion euros. Now, the continent's GDP is actually made up, on average, of around 5% from remittances. And also from Liberia and Gambia, we can see that the remittance cost contribution to the GDP is up to a whopping 20%. Global remittance flows to Africa are now actually larger than international development assistance to these countries. And this is particularly interesting in the EU-Africa context because, as we know, the European Union is the biggest development aid donor to African countries. Also, the continent faces the highest remittance fees globally. On average, companies charge around 8%, and this costs a staggering 1.6 billion euros every year. And the problem is largely because of the lack of competition in the market. Now, this amount of money is enough to fund primary school education for 14 million children. And to kind of give you an idea of the gravity of this, 14 million is the population of Burkina Faso. And on the policy side, this is where the European Union really comes in. Under the Migration and Development Trust Fund, both the EU and Africa have been working on reducing transfer costs of remittance fees and encourage the use of other sources of finance. So the fund offers a series of grants for co-financing initiatives, for example in developing new financial products, but also looking at new ways of e-banking or mobile banking, most notably in North and West of Africa. And more recently, within the context of the migrant and refugee crisis discussions here in Europe, both European and African leaders in November pledged to slash costs of remittances to less than 3%. However, as we know, this did not happen, and the agreements made at the summit did not include any proposals for legislation on remittances. Now, in fact, it has been reported that the reluctance to agree was actually due to a belief that this would reduce remittance income from the African diaspora in Europe. However, not all is lost. The European Commission, as part of its priorities, is actually looking at a new policy on legal migration, and the consideration of easing the remittance process and fees is also included. So, on the policy front, it's definitely a wait and see game. So, we go and speak to business. We speak to two co-founders who are working on easing the process through technology for remittances. Sinouhe Monteiro and Stephane Ugeux. We've covered some of the central EU policy discussions around the remittance market already, and so now we'd like to hear from you as entrepreneurs about the market in practice. So if you could first off explain the remittance process from a European country to an African country.
So usually people go to a brick and mortar store, either they use cash or they go to the bank, they take out the money, they go, they make the line, it can take some time. They receive a form, they fill out the form with the name of the recipient, the amount of money that they want to send or the person has to receive, and then he goes back to the cashier enters the transaction, he checks his ID, because if you don't have your ID with you, it doesn't go through, and then when you validate the process, you give them a code. So the person has to take the code, send it to his friend or his family in Africa, and he has to go finally to the brick and mortar store, make the line, write his number, write the code, give his ID, so you have to make the KYC as well, and write actually the exact amount of money. So if those three security checks are validated, he can receive the money. But usually he can receive either in the local currency or the dollar. Usually people rather want to have it in dollars, so they can exchange at a better rate.
What are the main challenges for sending money from Europe to Africa?
So some of the challenges are that people have to go to specific brick and mortars to send money back to their families. So sometimes they'll have to do line, the shops are not open 24/7, and then it can happen that some people don't even have identification, so they have to use somebody else send the money. Another problem is if you want to use an online platform, you don't have a credit card or they don't really accept your method of payments. But overall, let's say, to send money from Europe to Africa is not a problem. I think the alternatives are there, but the fees are generally really high. More or less, it's around from 8 to 12%. It depends on which African country you send the money to and in what country you're sending the money. And the fees and the exchange rate will depend on, the amount of people that send in certain countries,
Yeah.
That's how it works. It's never just one price.
Okay, and to what extent does the process differ between different European countries when you send money back home, but also between different African countries?
Well, as far as the European countries to send money in Africa, it's mainly the same rules and the same laws. There's not really a problem with the sending money. There are many ways to do it, but like Stephane just mentioned, the fees are quite high. Not everybody in Europe has access to a credit card as well. So people also have built relationship with their brick and mortars because of certain countries they send money to. The people don't have the accessibility to their bank account. Yeah. So it's easier for them to go and pick up the cash. And then in certain countries in Africa, let's say in some North African countries, you can't really send money from them to Europe. So there's more of a problem of the money coming out.
Right.
The going, it's not really a problem, it's more out. And also there's a lot of countries that, depend also a lot on the money that is being sent towards them. Yeah. So you have this differentiation. So let's say in Algeria, you can't send money back. The money has to stay inside the country. It's really hard for people to take it out, but that's kind of a different discussion.
Okay. So if I'm hearing sort of 8 to 12%, they seem quite high, and if we consider proposals that the European leaders said that they would be putting on the table but never actually did, to decrease those fees up to 3%, would that be workable? Would that help? Would that make it easier? Do you think that's a significant change, or should we look to industry to do something?
In my opinion, it would be a significant change. Looking at the reality and understanding how remittances work, I don't think it's going to be that easy or impossible, but it has to be done. And I believe those that can make this change are people who are working within the field and like ourselves, trying to create better access, cheaper access for people to actually send remittances from one place to the other at a lower fee. I don't think we should just wait for laws to come in, but I totally support them. I think this money would definitely help for the development of a lot of countries in Africa which need that money to rebuild in their economies. So yes, it is very important.
So in the remittances discussion, we've heard a lot in the news about mobile money. Kenya seems to be, a flagship example of this process. How does it work? Is it really beneficial? Is it going to help us overcome some of the challenges that you were talking about in terms of the price and the accessibility? Could you tell us a bit more about it?
So mobile money, to brief it, is that the telco now has an agreement in some country with the bank and the state to have on their mobile, on their number, the number became a bank account. So with that, they can receive money, sending money, store the money, and take it out. So it has changed around those countries, but the most successful story is obviously M-Pesa in Kenya. So with that, when the interconnectivity between the remittance and the mobile money will be fully functional in Africa, you can finally receive to your account the money instantly and 24/7. So whenever you want, you can send it, you're gonna pay your bills, even your doctor fee, because you know that it's instant and the easiness of doing it, because you don't need a smartphone, you don't need anything, you just need a small phone and the people that send the money. And with that, you can even lower the fee because you don't necessarily go to a brick and mortar store. You can do it from these other possibilities to do it.
Do you think it opens the doors for backstreet operators and doing things under the table? And how much of that is a problem at the moment?
We haven't read specific numbers about it, but even when the World Bank released a report, they take that into account. It's like when I have a friend who goes to Burundi, they give me an envelope, bring it to my friends over there. Or even there is some like store here that say, okay, give me €100 here. Over there as a friend, we're gonna give him the same amount of money. So there is a lot of, like you say, backdoor channel that's happening. And until the problem of the fees is not solved, I don't know what's the policy. But I think now the policy take that into consideration, because it's a lot of money that can be used for better things here and in Africa to develop the countries. People will still use a backdoor channel, like just getting an envelope.
So thank you for your time today. It seems that it's a bit more about technology and industry over policy, which is great. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you also for inviting us.
Thank you for watching the Inside the Issue show. Next month, we'll be delving into the African interests involved in the EU aviation strategy. And until then, follow us on Twitter, subscribe to our YouTube page, and also check out the website for the new blog. Until then, my name is Ewala Co-Founders for What's in It for Africa.